Primo fa sera.
Welcome to Talking in Stations. I'm Matterall's other half, also known as Moxie Matterall. Today, in an effort to honor the Thanksgiving holiday and the effect that EVE Online has on family, we have some questions to bring EVE Online into a larger perspective of family and maybe even culture, greater culture. So for partners of EVE players and their children around the world, how does EVE affect the home and the family dynamic? So we have some basic questions that I guess I'll put out to the group. First one is, who introduced you to EVE and what is your relationship to them? Matterall, why don't you start?
All right. Well, first let me introduce who's here. We have with us today Kiskora.
Hi, guys. I also have my dog Ember, named after my alliance because I'm a huge nerd.
Awesome. And off camera today, we have Carneros.
Good morning, everyone.
And for guests today, we have Elise.
Hey, how's it going?
And we also have Wilhelm. How are you doing, Wilhelm?
Okie doke. You can just say Wilhelm.
Wilhelm. I don't know why I call you Wilhelm. It's the German in me. I don't have any German in me, but if I did. All right. So today's family day because it's Thanksgiving. We know you're going to be traveling. So we thought we would do an informal show with my beautiful wife over here. Let me point down. Otherwise, I'll be pointing at Kiskora. And so we're going to ask some questions that are probably something that people would want to ask you that didn't play EVE or have any reference. It's open to all you guys, including chat, if you guys want to answer there. So take it away, Miss Moxie.
Okay. The first question is, who introduced you to EVE Online and what is your relationship to this person?
I have a little bit of a story about that. Carneros here. There was a .com crash, and I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and I had a spare bedroom in my apartment, and a friend needed a place to live, and a friend of a friend, and I said, sure, come on in. He moved in with us, and my friend said he plays MMOs also, so you'll have something in common. And he played this game called EVE Online I'd never seen before. And he used to play it on a laptop sitting on the floor in the living room with the laptop on the coffee table and his back against the sofa. I don't know, it was the thing. And I would go every now and then and look at his screen, and none of it made any sense. It was mostly all black with a couple of little sparkle dots around it, and none of it made sense. But one day, and I'm playing World of Warcraft at the time, and one day he shows me an ad for a promotion where if he sponsors friends in to the game, they may win a trip to Iceland to attend EVE FanFest. And I said, why have you never invited me then? And he goes, oh, I thought you'd never. And he gives me an invitation, and I didn't win the trip. But I did have my life changed a lot, and I have attended FanFest 5 times now.
Oh.
For me, I started playing like right in my freshman year of college. I was hanging out in the library, and someone was playing EVE. I was like, oh, what's that? And they were like, oh, it's EVE Online. It's super fun, weird game. They had come from a game called Earth and Beyond, which I guess kind of collapsed and moved all their users over to EVE Online. And this person was like, yeah, it's a super fun game. I was like, okay, I'll try it. So I tried it. It was miserable. I hated it. I didn't get it. I sucked at it. And so I played for like 3 days. I mined in an ibis all those 3 days. And I didn't understand how anything worked. So I was like, okay, I'm going to buy this one ship. It seems super great. It's really fast. And I assume all ships are fungible. So I was just going to pick the fastest one. And it was a Galente shuttle. And I bought the 1 million ISK Galente shuttle, not the 4,000 ISK Galente shuttle, because I figured the 1 million ISK one would be better. Turns out I was horribly wrong. And then I didn't play Eve again for like a year because I was super mad and really disappointed in myself and embarrassed. And then they sent me like a little email thing like, hey, you should come back and try the game. I was like, oh, it's the summer. I've got nothing going on. I'll try this game again. Oh, I understand it way better now. Okay, I'm not complete Mongol when it comes to this. So yeah, and that's how I got into EVE Online.
Yeah, didn't you go on to get a degree? Did you finish your schooling?
Oh yeah, I finished college, and then I went to graduate school, and then I just stayed there for 6 years, getting as many degrees as I could. It helped fuel my EVE Online addiction, which was great.
Well, I think you're being modest because I know you've got like a few degrees. And now you work, or now what do you do for real life? Can we ask you that?
Yeah, sure. I'm a lawyer. It's for some reason EVE Online attracts lawyers. I have no idea what it is, but it feels like, especially in like null-sec alliances, it feels like a good 30% of people are lawyers. It's completely bizarre.
Can confirm. My husband is an attorney, so it works.
Yeah, exactly. Like something like 8 members of my corp, like some of the most active people in my corp, the like 20 most active, 8 are attorneys all throughout the US. We've got some in DC, some in Boston, a few in California.
Is anybody getting billed for their online time?
We joke about how many hours we're billing while in like really long tie-dye fights and stuff like
that. So you say you're not sure why lawyers are attracted to the game. What do you think that someone that comes from that kind of practice might find in EVE that they're not finding in their job or their life outside the game? Can you speculate?
I'm not quite sure. It is, I mean, being a lawyer is kind of, it's got the kind of cutthroat aspect to it, or at least is known for that. I don't think it actually is all that much, but EVE Online is super cutthroat game, so you can be pretty vindictive in the game, and it's I don't know, I like to think it's a thinking man's game more than a clicking man's game, because I cannot click for shit. Like any game that requires hand-eye coordination or anything like that, I'm bad at. But decision making, I can do that. So I have a feeling that that's probably what attracts other lawyers. I'm like, I can't play Overwatch because I'm really bad at clicking things. But EVE Online, it's got like server ticks and stuff, so I can click things. I can click F1 every once in a while.
So I have resisted getting to know anything about EVE Online, and Matterall will tell you. So can I ask if there's a sense of community in the game that maybe attracts somebody who is in a cutthroat business, even though it is cutthroat in the game? Is there any kind of sense of community that you think draws?
I think I don't know if I'm just bogarting all the attention for everyone, but I'm pretty sure the community is the only reason I'd say 30% of the people stick with the game, because it's really easy to burn out. And once I burn out a game, I just don't feel like looking at it again. The reason I continue playing EVE for going on almost 14 years now is because of the community. Like, I get to know people. We talk online and offline. If you're a member of like Pandemic Legion, or even if you're in any other group that we've ever interacted with, there's a good chance that we have talked at length outside of the game or about things other than the game, because for the longest time, EVE was known as kind of the game you play while playing other games, because there were like really boring downtimes, and you'd be able to get like your good fights and your good adrenaline fun moments in with these like 1 or 2 hour bursts that were more or less like scheduled for the longest time. It's not so much like that anymore, but there is still some elements of that to EVE, in terms of like being able to have on your calendar, oh, I'm playing EVE at 11 o'clock on Friday, and I can just sit in space and just mingle and chat with other people between now and then.
If I could chime in.
This is Ashtarothi. He's just joined us. We'll get him on video in a second.
Hi. So the community, as Elise pointed out, is extraordinarily important in EVE. A lot of people cite it as a big reason why they're still active in it. And I really think that there's 2 big pressures that causes it. One is the single-sharded nature of the universe. All of us know deep down inside that regardless of how much we hate each other, we all have to deal with each other in this one sandbox. There's no getting away from each other, and that one fact kind of allows you to separate the past from the present, if that makes sense. But also, Eve is just a really niche game. And so I don't know about a lot of other people, but, I don't get to actually like geek out with a lot of people about Eve. So if I encounter somebody who's interested in Eve, I don't care if they're my actual enemy in the game. Right now they are a kindred spirit in the fact that we both play this game.
I think we skipped over Will. Do you want to tell us how you got started? What was the first question? What was your first question?
I was just wondering if in your real life you feel like you're stuck in the sandbox with anyone. Like, is there a group at work that you're stuck in the sandbox with that you deal with differently than you would with the group on EVE?
I actually came over to EVE Online with a group from EverQuest 2. I was in a guild there at launch, and a bunch of them came over, and I joined them, and I played for a bit and went away, and played for a bit and went away. I think on the third try it stuck, and now everybody I came over with has left, but I found other groups to play with, and there's just something about the way EVE is, the social structure that's just it's hard not to be a part of it for me now. I just even when I'm not playing that much, I still pay a lot of attention to what's going on.
Okay.
What about you, Matterall?
I was hoping to push it along. Can you repeat the question?
I'll take the last one.
Go.
The last question was, how much does the community matter in the game? And I'll give a little example from my life again. I live in Southern California at the moment, and my nearest neighbor happens to play on the opposite side of the sort of political spectrum in EVE. And she and I will shoot each other in game if we ever see each other, forever in the same system. But yesterday I was going out to lunch, and I poked her on Discord and I said, I'm going out to lunch over by your neck of the woods at such and such restaurant. Pop by if you're in the neighborhood and say hi. And she said, I just left that place an hour ago. Be sure to look at the pies because they might be useful for Thanksgiving dinner. And, we get along great in real life, and we're friends, but we're not in the game. That's Lady Scarlet.
Oh.
I'll also, just talking about the community, since 2015 or something like that, my husband and I have been going to all the meetups that we can for the most part in the areas. If it's in the US, we try to make it if we can. We even started our own meetup in Missouri because there weren't a lot in the Midwest, so we wanted to have a big meetup here. And we meet people that we never would have otherwise just because we share this common interest in this game, and those friendships last. And we keep in contact even when people leave the game. And actually just yesterday, I had 2 different people driving through Missouri stop by and get dinner with us. So one of them came in for hunting season and the other one was moving cross country. Both of them didn't know each other in the game, but they both knew us. So we had a big dinner with all of our friends that were in town, and it was just really fun. And that's just, you don't get that in other games. Like, I've played plenty of other games, and that kind of kinship just isn't there. And that's really what keeps me playing.
So, Kaskora, can I ask you, who started playing first, you or your husband?
It was my husband. He got me into it. Well, his character is from like 2006. And so he played back then and then stopped playing and then decided he wanted to get back into it. Like right in the middle of law school, which probably is a bad idea in hindsight. But he was like, you might like this game. There's like a lot of resources and stuff. You might really like this mining aspect of the game, which anyone who knows about how I play the game, that's like, I don't think I've trained a mining skill since that first month that I played.
Thirsty killer.
Yeah. But we got into it, and I wanted to find us a corp, and I didn't really find one in HiSec that stuck. So we joined this silly one in wormhole space. And then the CEO got a new job and had to leave like 2 months later. And they decided that I should be the CEO for some reason. And so I took over Pos Party with 2.5 million skill points under my belt. And that will be 5 years ago in February. But it's been fun. It's been a ride, definitely. And and right now I'm in grad school. I've got 2 jobs. It's been crazy. And I still come back when I can. And I'm really excited when the semester's over so I can play more. It just, keeps you going.
So what's it like running a corporation?
I don't know.
It's a cyber corporation.
I actually put my Eve experience on one of my resumes for getting into my graduate assistantship, because they asked, what are your leadership skills and how do you have experience with them? So I was like, all right, well, I run a gaming community with over 100 people and organized shared interests and, talked it up and whatever. But it's just, I don't know, there's something about it. Just they all call me Space Mom in my corp, and actually in a lot of wormhole space, because I try to take care of people and I try to make sure that we keep going. Because to me, the most important part is that we maintain our community. I mean, that's what will hold us together in the long run. So I always try to focus on that when I'm providing instruction for people. I don't want to be a dictator. I don't want to like order people around. I just want to make sure that we're all on track, in the spirit of our alliance, because that will keep us going. Kills come and go. We've gotten evicted and we came back, but it's our community that held us together through all of it.
So can I ask, when you mentioned talking about it or putting it on your resume, when you talk about your life in the game, outside the game, to maybe people that don't play it, do you worry that you'll be judged? Do you scan sort of their reaction to see if you're talking to someone who understands? Or how do you feel about talking about it outside the community, inside the game?
I think that in general, nerd culture is becoming a lot more mainstream in the world. And so it's not really looked down upon. I'm not really worried about being judged. I kind of joke it off, but like my office at work is covered in like nerd stuff. I've got like a whole bunch of Pokemon stuffed animals and all my Eve stickers and all kinds of stuff. So I don't hide at all. But when I try to explain it to people, I always say that, well, I'm a member of a very large online gaming community is usually how I start it. And then it's within the game of EVE Online. And they'll ask me like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, it's online spaceship game. And it's a sandbox. So you can do whatever you want to do in it. And our group all play together and we're all from all over the world. And I'm somehow the leader of it. And I play with my husband and all of our friends, and it's a lot of fun. And usually that's like, oh, that's cool. And then that's the end of the conversation. But some of my coworkers ask me more detailed questions. Well, because like after we got evicted, or no, after we got evicted and we started our new wormhole home and we put down our first Fortizar, someone from my corp sent me flowers at work to congratulate me on making it. And so I had to explain like what the flowers were to all my coworkers and be like, this is why it's a big deal. And this is why they felt like they should send me something. And it was just, it was a little bit interesting, but I had to kind of explain to them why it was everything, why it mattered so much. And I think they kind of understand when I try to explain it, but they'll never quite get it just because they're not they're not involved in it.
Real quick, how many dogs do you have there?
So there's 5. We have Ember, who's been jumping up on me. We have the one with the pointy ears is Gambit. The dark brown one's Remy. I have an old one in a brown sweater. That's Oliver. And then Kaya is a floof ball, and she's kind of off in the corner. She's a little weird. I'll bring her up on camera at some point.
Let's bring Ashtarothi into this real quick before we go on. I think the last question was, what are you compensating for?
What am I compensating for?
That was not a question.
No, when I talk to people about Eve, oh, hold on, I've got a guest too.
Yay! It's the little one.
Hi.
Say hi, Zed.
Hi.
How old are you?
So this guy actually, he has his now. How old are you, Zed?
5.
He's 5. Yep.
We got to start him young.
Yeah, he actually has his own character. No,
Voice of Doom.
when I talk to people about Eve, usually their eyes glaze over, which because I talk a lot about Eve, so that's why I end up podcasting a lot. But usually I just assume that they're going to make a misunderstanding, like assume that it's like World of Warcraft or whatever, you know, like, oh, look, you play an MMO online and, you know, whatever. And I just kind of work with that.
Actually, I'd like to ask a different question. Is your name Pyrodante? Is that your name?
Ashtarothi, but or Pyrodante is another.
Oh, okay, that's what I'm seeing on screen. One of my questions was, what's the story behind your name on Eve, if anyone wants to start?
I hit random name generator a few times until I got a pretty cool sounding name, and did it a few more times, and then I got Elise Randolph, and I was like, I probably won't play this game that much, so might as well just.
Actually, I put a lot of thought into all of my names. Ashtarothi is based on like Astarte and Ashtaroth, the like demons and angel or gods of. And then I've got another character named Invictus Demonus, which is unconquerable spirit, and Mortis Astarte, which is death.
I see you have a little competition there for attention. That's what I'm giggling at.
I can say for my name, it's a little bit kind of complicated to explain, but I have something called synesthesia, which for people who don't know it, it's where the senses in your brain kind of overlap, so you experience them simultaneously. So some people can see sounds as colors, or they can taste colors or something weird like that. For me, it's all about letters and words. So every letter has a color to it. And when they combine to make words, then that kind of melds together. So when I was coming up with my name, I made my character, and then I had to match the name to the colors that I felt were her. So I had to kind of mesh around all these different colors, almost kind of like you're blending flavors in a way. Like you got to see how it looks and kind of check out the different letters. So that's how I came up with mine.
That explains your rainbow icon on your Discord.
Well, that's another story altogether.
Synesthesia, that's what an XTC singer has.
There's a few people that have had it that are kind of big. I know one of the ones that I always knew about was Eddie Van Halen had it. So he would make different sounds for his songs, and he'd name them with colors, which I thought was always kind of cool. I had a friend that could taste colors, and I played WoW with him back in the day, and he could not go into the Draenei capital because he said it just tasted horrible, which I thought was kind of funny.
What about you, Matterall? What's the story behind your name?
The story behind the Matterall name is I was going to make a throwaway character because I was going to start writing, and I knew if I wrote something that made somebody angry that I'd get killed. So I thought I'll just not use my real name so I can jettison this ID at any time. So I thought, well, if it's going to be news reporting, what's my favorite news channel? And it was NPR. So it was All Things Considered. And I thought, okay, well, how about All Things Matter? And then I flipped it around and merged it, and that was that.
I did not know that.
What's funny about this thing is because you honestly don't know how long you're going to last in it. You just kind of do things to throw them away. Just like Elise was saying, he's like, I'm not going to play this very long. So he just said, I'll take Elise Randolph. And then it ends up sticking around.
Funny that you called me by Pyrodante because that was my name before Eve. Ashtarothi has really taken over my online persona across all
That's your main identity, yeah.
Well, and it is weird like that because Cascora has been the name that now I use everywhere. Like I have it as my Pokemon Go name, and I've got it as my screen names, and I use it when I go to Starbucks because it's easier to spell than my normal name. So, it's just interesting how that works out. Also, this is Kaya now, the floofer. She's a little special.
No, Kaya. So, Will, what's your name from? Since it sounds interesting.
So back in 1986, we'll go way back in history.
It's a good year.
I got my first modem, and I logged on to this Genie, which was an online service then, to play a game called Stellar Emperor. Internet spaceships in the 80s, essentially. And in the background, the TV was on, and Hogan's Heroes was on. And I was prompted for a name, and Colonel Klink was on the screen, and he answered the phone and said, "Colonel Wilhelm Klink." I said, "Wilhelm." And that sort of stuck with me since then. And then I was in a group called the Arcturan Empire, so Arcturus. So when I came to EVE Online, another space game, I just pulled that forward from the 80s.
Oh, look at somebody in chat said, I took my first breath in 1986. Wow. That's pretty cool. So you're Colonel Klink of Arcturus.
Something like that. I didn't really roll with the Klink thing, but Wilhelm just seemed like the name at the moment.
Yeah. All right, what else do you want to know about EVE players?
So last night when Matterall was talking to some other people putting the show together, it was mentioned that there are challenges in the game that expect you to accomplish great things. And I'm wondering if those challenges in the game and how you accomplish them help you to grow in your real life outside the game, or do they help you avoid your real life outside the game?
I think that they help for me. I've always struggled with self-confidence in my real life, and EVE has been a way for me to learn to be more confident and to be stronger in myself, especially being the CEO of this group, because it's almost like, I could separate my real life and practice being strong in game and then utilize it in my real life. So like pretty early on in my EVE career, I moved and got a new job and was working on a pretty big project, working on rebranding the company I was with. And my boss was real mean and real judgmental. And I had to basically convince him why the decisions I thought were best were the way we should go. And so I had to sit down in his office by myself and basically tout how great my work was, which I always feel like, oh, it's not that great. I never do that great. It's just still amateur. And I basically kind of pulled in from what I learned in EVE. I was able to sit down and be like, so this is how it is. This is how we're doing it. And this is what I think is right. And this is why I think it. And this is why I'm right. And he was like, all right, cool. And just accepted it because I had that level of confidence that I never really had before. So it's interesting that I was able to kind of pull that in, but I guess it sticks with you though.
Yeah, for sure. EVE gave me a bunch of people management skills. As odd as that sounds, because I played EVE before I had an actual job, because I started EVE when I was 18 or 19 years old. Actually, I think even before. But I didn't have a job, and I was a professional student for a while. And during that period, I was managing people in space. I was essentially just running a small little tiny firm in space. And then when I got a job, I had to do something where I actually had to manage a small team of 6 people. And all of the skills that I picked up in EVE were somehow applicable to managing those people, except it was way easier, right? Because in EVE Online, you have to motivate people to do things, and you can't really give them a reward, like a tactic reward. You can't say, you get an extra bonus of $500 if you do this job. You have to find a way to motivate them to do that task. And gotta get not only keep them involved, but keep them sustained for the long haul for everyone else. And in the real world, you can just be like, oh, if you don't do this, you're literally off the team. So it's so much easier to manage those people with some Eve skills. Obviously, not all of them. You can't shout at them. You can't do anything like that. But I found there was a fun overlap in there. And when it comes to Eve as an escape mechanism, I'd rather I kind of take Eve a little bit more seriously, or at least in my prime, I would take Eve more seriously. Sometimes when I was at work, if I was like just zoning out, I'd bring up some Eve spreadsheets whenever people were walking by my office. They'd be like, oh shit, that guy's like really doing some really hard work. Because it was like just spreadsheets on spreadsheets across like 3 monitors. And they're like, oh shit, this guy's really into it. He's really doing his job. Man, I wish I could be like that, really driven like that guy. And in reality, I was just goofing around, trying to come up with some fun things to do in Eve, or trying to decide what I was going to build next, or how I was going to make more ISK in the game and stuff.
That's hilarious.
I think that one of the things that really gets me about Eve is the fact that it really is a role-playing game, unlike other MMOs or even other role-playing games, where if you go, I want to be a paladin, so I select paladin, or even I want to be a tank for my group, so I select paladin and I level them up and I get the gear I need and I select the talents, and now I'm a paladin, and I can do paladin-y things. In Eve, you can do whatever you want, but you actually have to do it, right? You can be a military commander, you can be a scout, you can be a politician, you can be a graphic designer. But if you're not good at it, you're not going to do well at it within the game, which as a consequence means that the game becomes a really good test bed for all kinds of things. When I wanted to test out my graphics design skills, I would try it with Eve, paraphernalia or propaganda, because you know what? People will tell you if it sucks and why. When I wanted to get into video editing, I did Eve videos. When I wanted to learn, or when I wanted to put myself as a leader of an organization and learn those skills to how to lead people, like the other people have been talking about, I consciously decided to take over a corporation because that was an inroad. It's easier to get hired as a CEO in Eve than it is as a real company of several hundred people. So to acquire those skills, Eve becomes a really good place to practice them.
Yeah, and if you look at Jonica there, he learned how to program by playing Eve. So
heck yeah,
a lot of people practice skill.
I was going to say earlier, you guys were saying that there's so many lawyers. There are lawyers, military personnel, and programmers, or IT personnel. Those are the 3 overrepresented groups in Eve.
Yeah, it's super. I'd say that like of those 3, that's probably 3 out of 4 of the people that I meet in Eve Online. They fall into one of those 3.
Well, look at just the people in this channel who are on camera and talking on the show right now.
I'm 2 of the 3, so.
Which 2?
Software developer and ex-military.
So what pushback have you gotten from your significant others or children from the time you spend on the game?
Well,
I have the joy of playing with my significant other, so we don't really have a lot of pushback, except for it definitely means that we don't get our housework done as fast, because it's like, oh, but there's a fight going on, or oh, we got to log in, or oh, we haven't been on very much, and so we kind of
Do you argue about stuff in the game like, hey, where'd you leave the Falcon?
Oh yeah, all the time. That's like our biggest arguments is over game stuff. Or like I'll be like, babe, I need to borrow your rolling hick, and then I'll grab it and then put it back somewhere, and he's like, I can't find it. Where'd you leave it? And then we get into fights over that kind of stuff. Or there's one time that I borrowed his ship and I got it blown up, and then he's like, God, why would you even use that ship for that situation? And it's just stuff like that. But it's nice to be able to play with someone that, especially that you live with and you're married to, because it makes it seem a little bit more important because we both care about it.
Will, how about you?
As I was saying the other night, after like more than 20 years together, my wife and I have reached sort of a state of détente. she is not really interested in the video game thing. I am. It's kind of my hobby off in my office. There used to be some problems earlier on, but Eve is kind of easier because she likes to hear about sort of the meta things going on sometimes, and she likes to go to Eve Vegas. She likes to meet people and talk about stuff there. So you met her at Eve Vegas this year, and
Yeah, very nice.
it hasn't been and then my daughter and I. My daughter is more like me. She doesn't play Eve, but we play other games online together. So it kind of fits into our household.
But after a while,
I mean, there are times of too much, and I make a conscious effort to take a break and spend time with my wife. So it's a balance.
For the longest time when I was in graduate school, nobody invited me anywhere on the weekends to do anything, because I'd always flake out somehow because I was playing Eve, and I'd just get too involved. Like, it would start at like 4 p.m. my time, and I would just get sucked into it, and it'd be like 11 or 12. I'd be like, oh shit, I was supposed to meet those people. So after a while, they just stopped full out inviting me. And I was like, guys, why didn't you invite me? And they're like, you never ever show up. I was like, oh yeah, that's probably the case.
uh-oh.
Yeah, my wife's a real estate agent, so she has open houses on the weekend. So I suddenly have all this free time during the weekend to play now too.
I will say something that's funny is that my mom has gotten into this kind of, because I talk about it a lot when I see her. And she has a sheep farm, which is then how we got our new logo with our ram on it, because I kept telling all my corpse stories about the sheep and they thought it was funny. So then my mom now thinks it's hilarious that my gaming group has a logo based off of her farm. So she put all of our logo stickers on her car. So whenever she goes to all the herding competitions and sheep things, she's got all these ram logos on the back of her car. Then everyone thinks, oh, that's such a cool icon. What's it from? And she's like, oh, it's my daughter's group.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible. My wife is actually really supportive of me. Sorry. Because when we had some financial problems, the Eve community really rallied behind us, and so I can use that as a leverage anytime that I need to. That, hey, the community supported us, but also really it is for me a matter of my mental health, right? Because like being attached to good people who can who respect me and who like I have a good relationship with, is really important when most of my day is chasing around a 5-year-old and various taking care of the house and other affairs. So, I don't get a lot of positive feedback in my day-to-day life. And so it's very obvious when I'm cut off from Eve for a long time, cut off from my people, as it were, I start to become more and more dour. So, she's realized that even though it sometimes is annoying, that there's a benefit to just letting me go and do my fleets.
Want me to answer that one? Or?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my wife, no, just kidding. Yeah, it's caused a lot of problems, especially when I was doing writing. Like I was, wouldn't you say you can join in with me on this one. Taking a lot of time to write stuff because I write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite the same first paragraph. And then that's 80% of the time. And then the last 20% of the time is blasting through the article. But that used to take so much time. I'd be up late, be walking around with bags under my eyes. I still have them. I think that took a lot, but what would you say to that? That's a question for you, really.
Well, I don't know how much to say, but I think that if you can sort of control the amount of time you play, then it affects the surrounding family less. And I think part of what happened with those late nights is that then with lack of sleep comes a cold or a flu, and then I get it, and then our son gets it, and then the late nights become frustrating on a different level.
So writing has made me a vector.
But I will say, if I could, that what I'm hearing from everyone is that the sense of community in Eve is really more like a family community than, say, a friend community in the sense that I have always felt that in your family, you can have pretty vicious fights and say pretty awful things, but they're your family, so you'll never lose them. And some of the fights I've had with my sisters, I certainly would never, ever have with a friend. And from a comment earlier about being in a sandbox with a group, it sounds like maybe any of you can disagree about things, you can kill each other in the game, but that somehow you go back to being that part of community, and there's a different sort of level of forgiveness than you might have outside the game with friends in real life. And do you agree with that?
I think that's a pretty good assessment. I would like to caution you that there are definitely people that play Eve that have completely lost sight of that boundary. So just because the people here have kind of figured it out doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't people that are like bitter and, really wrapped up into the details. But for the most part, I think that a lot of players that have played for a long time or for any length of time do agree that we're all in this together. We are kind of all a family, regardless of, and you don't get to choose your family. It's just the people that are there.
I think it really depends. People can get their tempers flared, but it's sometimes I think that overall, I like to think that, people can learn to forgive and forget, but there's a lot of people that don't. And that's just kind of the fact of it. But within my group, I like to think that we're all pretty close, but then there's still some times where something happens and someone gets really upset and it never really gets better. And those are the times that, for me, that make the game the hardest. It's not when we got evicted and lost a lot of our stuff. Like, it's when we have people that get personally upset and then come after us for personal reasons. Those are always the times that stress me out, that I worry about outside of the game, that I get upset about, is when people, a lot of times it's always something silly and it just, escalates out. And a lot of times it's misunderstandings or things, but people take it personally and it becomes a big thing. And those are the times that have been the roughest for me, I know.
It actually reminds me a lot of a military unit, right? Because you don't get to choose who's part of your team. People come and go somewhat randomly, sometimes by choice, sometimes not. But more importantly, like, there's a lot of grudges and there's a lot of competitions internally or whatever. But it's the external pressures. It's the challenges that you undergo together. It's the threats that are imposed upon you all that kind of forge the group, if that makes sense.
I would definitely agree with that. But I guess for me, being the CEO, being the leader, and also being a little bit kind of a figurehead, like, people know me in wormhole space. They've seen me around for a long time. I go to the meetups. I've talked at Vegas. So I think that people sometimes will take what I say a little bit more personally. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that I'm a woman too. I'm sure that contributes some. There's I'm one of the very few female CEOs in wormhole space. And I've had a lot of people who have, been upset with me because of just stuff. And I feel like sometimes it's blown out of proportion. And maybe if I was a guy, it wouldn't be. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I've had
people think you're hysterical.
Yeah, I've had some people. There was one guy in the chat one time that said, like, "Oh, it's Kaskora, the most power-hungering feminist in Eve." And it's like, oh, yeah, you got me. Oh, man. But I've also had people that have, they call me a bitch, or they say that I'm two-faced because I'm nice to people until I'm not. And of course I am. Sometimes I like to be a nice person. I try to be, but sometimes people are jerks. And so then I stop being nice to them, because why would I keep being nice to someone who treats me like crap? But it's been something I have to...
Eve calling you two-faced is a bit amusing.
It's definitely happened. The whole reason we got evicted was because we met people in real life, we became friends, and then things happened where I think that because we had met in real life, they took it way more personally than they probably should have, and things spiraled out of control. And then next thing you know, that's a gross oversummary of it, but I think that still can happen, where people, they because it's a game that forges these really strong bonds, that it can kind of swing the opposite direction sometimes, where it also can, those grudges can really hit hard home. And it's hard, you know, to navigate those sometimes, because I'm really bad at that too. I'm those are the parts that are hard for me, trying to deal with people who are like just really hate me and really angry at me. It affects you, you know.
Wild.
Yeah, I ran a big chat community for Eve called the Tweet Fleet Slack for a while. And from that time, I gained a lot of enemies. So that has definitely come back to bite us, where
Oh, God,
not necessarily we got attacked because of that, but we definitely
How
have
many
people that
people were in that
continue to
group?
in Tweet Fleet?
Yeah.
A couple thousand at least.
Yeah,
when I was,
the wormhole channel in Tweet Fleet became almost, I mean, it was, oh God.
Bad moderating, Astarothi.
It was, well, it got to a point where you couldn't anymore because it was just so full of just despicable memes and crap.
I cut heads off of this Discord all the time. As soon as I see somebody who I even suspect is going to be like somebody who's just there to cause trouble, I disappear them.
I mean, and that's good, but the wormhole channel in Tweet Fleet got way past the point of no return, and it became really bad. I had to delete it all. I was getting really stressed out over it because people were calling me horrible stuff in that channel, and then they'd all jump on top of it, and then it would just turn into this big circle jerk of them all hating on me, and so I had to just get rid.
So the crowd mentality, the group mentality, cuts both ways, Moxie.
Yeah. So
I was going to give her a conclusion. She's like, I already got there.
Oh, I don't think her mic's active.
Sorry, I've seen Matterall get pulled into big drama that's affected a road trip once.
Not this game, though. Not this game.
Oh, it wasn't?
No.
Oh, okay. And I always wonder, you know, if it's so stressful and so petty, like doesn't seem like a worthwhile hobby. Do you know what I mean?
It's one of those that it's the good and the bad. Like there's some crappy times, and there's some vitriol and some mean things that are said, but I have to remember that the game that matters is the game that I play with my group, with my alliance, with my corp and our friends. And those are what really matter. And I have to learn to tune that stuff out. And I've always been bad about that. Like when I was in high school, I got bullied really bad because I always let that stuff affect me really, really like deep. And I need to learn to not, because ultimately that's just noise. And those people don't matter. Like the people that do matter are the ones that I care about, the ones I fly with every day, and the ones I talk with on Discord, the ones that drive cross country and meet me for drinks and then I see at the meetups. And those are the ones that matter. And those friendships and those relationships are more important to me than
real talk. Isn't it weird though? You meet somebody you know online.
I mean, it's
like weird.
It is a little weird at first, especially because we have a hard time calling each other by real names. And sometimes people's in-game names are real silly. Like we had one guy, his name was Quiggle. And so it's like, I know I want to call him Jason, but I know him as Quiggle. And so I kept calling him that. And, you know,
his name
it's
wasn't
weird.
Squee.
The problem that I run into is that consistently I meet people who know me way better than I know them. Right? Like it's not a court mate or something. It's like, oh yeah, you live there? Hold on, I can come by and drop by. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but
we've had quite a few people stay at our house who've been through Eve. There's a picture of me and like my lead FC and my like industry director and my husband all like with Santa for Christmas last year. And, you know, we do the meetup here, and those things are things that I always look forward to, because when you're in person, a lot of the drama also doesn't matter because it's all in the game and it's all just background noise. And what's more important is that we're all part of this community and we all want to enjoy that common thread and get to know each other. And that's also how we can put aside a lot of like real world differences. Like I know there's a lot of people that share different political views and different life views and all kinds of backgrounds. And we are able to put that aside to enjoy this game together and have a way to have a community without any of that. And for the most part, it's all the stuff that's outside of that can be bad. And we just have to then rely on the bonds that we have within our group. Like whenever we were getting evicted and I was being stressed out, I was able to like talk to my group and let them know and be like, this is real hard. I don't know how to do this. And they held me up. And it's through that we keep going.
Yeah,
So
I think. Sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
think all of this comes together though, because there's two sides to every story, right? The honest truth is that outside is a storm. There's plenty of terrible people out there. There's people that want to scam you. There's people that don't care about you, which is why it's even more important to build your home, right? So like the people that I let into my corporation or my alliance, I see myself as kind of sheltering them from the storm while at the same time kind of maintaining the quote unquote better standard or different standard that we want to have. And so when things happen like grudges and all that stuff, what ends up happening is that only further solidifies our little friendship group, right? Because again, we're struggling through these efforts together. You know, she might have gotten evicted because of some petty grudge, but her friends came to back her up, and that part of the story is what ultimately matters for them.
Mhm.
Well, I actually have to go. So I have one sort of, I don't know if it's a question or just like sort of open, if you wanted to share. So as a spouse who does not play the game, but has been heavily impacted by someone who does play it, is there anything that you would want to say to a spouse or a partner who does not play to help them understand why the game is good for you and good for the relationship?
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, man.
Will, you have an answer, Will?
I think everybody has their media and their entertainment. Everybody kind of, or like a lot of relationships struggle with difference in what there is for entertainment. You know, some people play Eve way too much. Some people sit on a couch and drink beer too much. Proper communication is what makes a relationship work. But, you know, I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that, respecting what the person does to decompress and maybe understanding a little bit as to why or what parts of it that they get out of it. Because one of the interesting things about Eve is that Eve is a lot of things that most people would not consider to be fun to do. And yet a lot of people that play Eve do find them fun, maintaining spreadsheets, keeping track of people, mining, for Christ's sake. So, understanding what your spouse gets out of it may be valuable, but also just respecting the fact that everybody's got their hobbies.
I think that's the important thing to pick up on, is that for most people, Eve is not a game, it's a hobby. And it's not just something that you just play, it's something that you get invested in. And anyone that has hobbies is going to get invested in their hobbies. They're going to want to spend extra time doing it. They're going to want to spend money on it. They're going to want to spend time with people who share that same hobby. It's the same kind of thing. And I think that that's really where people need to understand, is that it gives you the same kind of satisfaction as other hobbies do. I mean, we all have our hobbies. We should anyway, because it helps give you something to focus on and find enjoyment in and get invested in outside of the monotony or the busyness or the stress of day-to-day life. And I mean, my mom has her sheep farm and all of her weird dogs and sheeps and livestock and stuff, and I've got my internet spaceships, and I can relate to her and understand that she enjoys that and it gives her purpose in life, and I don't really share that, but I can respect that, and she does the same for me and my crazy internet spaceships, and we can talk about it to each other because we know that we both care about it.
Can we get Elise or Will?
Yeah, as I said before, I think we've reached like the détente thing. My wife gets that this is my hobby, and I'm more than a bit of the introvert, and I like to spend time with the internet spaceships and just with some people I know on comms, and then I turn around and write about it. So she sees it like I have that enough passionate that I then go ahead and tell the tales of what we did the night before and that sort of thing on my blog. I also do like, because my wife and daughter don't play, but there's some bleed over between Eve and their lives. My daughter just like this last week complained to me that she says op success when something goes well at school, that sort of thing, and everybody looks at her like, what does that mean, op success? I'm just like,
that's great,
because I say that all the time. Every time there's like a good thing, she's like, so it's like they both she and my wife say that now all the time.
How old is your daughter?
My daughter is about to turn 17. Ugh.
Oh,
Good luck.
I've seen a picture of her. It's a good thing it's not public. It's very beautiful.
So I am going to say goodbye. It was very nice to meet all of you. I'm going to go partake in my hobby of having brunch with my girlfriends and drinking mimosas. So
That sounds lovely.
have
That's a solid hobby.
rest of a show. Very nice to meet all of you.
You too.
Yeah, good to
All
see
right.
you.
So long.
And one question, is that the same window behind the two of you? Are you like in the same room?
Yeah. Look at this. We'll break the, what is it, third or fourth one?
The fourth wall is crumbling right now.
Aww.
Bye, everyone.
How'd that happen?
Bye.
There we go.
All right.
What is real?
All right. Now we have the darkened windows. Looks like a horror film. So we'll get rid of that. All right. So that was a little bit of the letting the family come into EVE Online and talk about real world stuff, because as you know, it's Thanksgiving in the United States. So a lot of people will probably be traveling when they listen to this. And so it's we thought we'd do that kind of a show today. Since the EVE is really, they're doing stuff, but really don't have a lot to report. But we do have stuff to report, some stuff. So we'll get to that in just a second. Before we wrap up this segment, do you have anything you wanted to say about this thing?
When it comes to family, like the one hilarious thing, I've played EVE for a long time, more like a third of my life, which is weird to say out loud.
Yeah.
And I've been on the CSM, and I've gone to FanFest, and I've gone to Vegas. But when I first started, my first trip ever to Iceland was through the CSM, and it was, I think, like 8 years ago. And my mom was super mad because I was not coming home for like a certain break that I had. I was instead going to Iceland. And I was like, she was like, yo, why are you going to Iceland? Tell me, like, what is this? So I explained the game to her, and she did not get it at all. She was like, okay, whatever, that's weird. And I explained the game to her, like, every single time there's like a Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, like a birthday, anything like that. I explain like parts of the game, just like little bits, as best as I can. And I try to like simplify it the best of my ability. I'm really good at oversimplifying EVE, but I even oversimplify that oversimplification. And a few years ago, she was like, okay, I got it now. I understand what this is, or at least the broad strokes of it. And all she does now is send me these really odd news articles about Iceland that come into like her news feed. She'll email it to me and be like, hey, I saw this thing about Iceland. That has to do with your game, right? So like the latest one, I'm going to try and find it. It was something ridiculous, but it makes me laugh every single time.
It's funny how people catch on to those little things, or like that registers.
Sorry, the last article she sent me was from like 3 days ago. It was from the New York Times, and the article headline is "In Iceland, local fair inside an old fish factory." She was like, "Thinking of you," and just sent me.
That's somebody. That's somebody who loves you.
Yeah,
I love that.
That's my mom's understanding of EVE Online.
Oh, that's cool.
It's funny how those kind of relationships spill out too. I was just thinking too, I mean, you said that you've been playing EVE for a third of your life. I mean, it puts things in perspective a little bit. Like, what kind of other game has lasted to this kind of extent? Like, there's not many that could say that. And we actually have people in our corp that, they come to visit us for the first time, and it's like the first time they've met anyone online. And we have a friend that when we first started playing this game, he's from Russia and he was 17, and that was 5 years ago. And now he's looking at making his first trip to the US just to visit us. And it's just, I don't know, it's crazy to think about, but he has to try to explain it to his parents why he's traveling to the United States and for what reason. And it's just funny.
Kind of murky.
See, Often I don't try to make them understand. I just throw spreadsheets at them until they're like, okay, obviously I don't want to know. And then they just are okay.
That's one way to do it.
Somebody said something really important here. The Easy Tech guy there says, makes me think how to explain Eve to my mom, especially after some recent events. Wanted to be sure that if something were to ever happen to him, that in real life, that people would know how to get a hold of his court mates and stuff. I think that's really interesting because people can just disappear if they're not communally plugged in. They just are gone one day to the next.
And that has happened too, where like we'll get a post on Reddit or something where it's like, hey guys, this is this person that knew this. By the way, this person, something tragic happened or something like that. And that's the only way we know is because they happen to have access to that person's Reddit account. And so just went to go see where that person posted. Didn't know anything about us, didn't know what we were doing, but just knew that that person came to this community.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we had a court member that disappeared for a little while, and we were real worried about him. And I went through like all my backlogs of text and anything, and I found an email address, and I sent him an email. I think his wife answered maybe that he had been in the hospital, and he was getting better and was going to be returning at some point. But it's sad because you always wonder when people disappear. I mean, it's normal. I mean, people leave the game and they come back and they leave and whatever, but you always wonder that, you hope that your people are okay. Cause these are people you care about. And when something happens, you feel it,
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole show on itself, is the connections you make in Eve and how they are real and what that means when the barriers of being friends in real life or the barriers of being in the same physical town, come into play. That's very interesting stuff. All right. I hope that worked out. She was really just supposed to interview me, but I decided to totally deflect onto you guys. So thanks for taking the bullets.
Nice work on that.
Doing our part, man.
Yeah. I got to dodge all those questions. They're actually pretty good. And I was really impressed with like how she was genuinely interested. And the fact that she did this, she never does stuff like this. So, all right. Thank Moxie for coming on. That's not her real name, obviously. But I think it describes her well. So let's go on. There's a couple of things we want to cover here. We're going to say, some of the stuff that you should do this week as far as specials to save some money real quick, and then we'll get into some news. I haven't seen anything released for, and correct me if I'm wrong, but EVE Online hasn't said what they're going to do for, was it Black Friday? Last year they did 3 different bundles. They did the King's Ransom, Omega, and New Eden. And those had a bunch of stuff in them that you could get. And they also did a few other things. So there's definitely going to be something. You can check by this website called Is There Any Deal? And then you type in EVE Online and it shows you all the EVE Online deals. Is there any deal? We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, the issue is like normally I could say like go through the sissy files or something and find like skins or whatever that hasn't been touched. But the problem is that usually with Black Friday, especially you just mentioned last year's skins, I think that they're pretty good at not giving us any warning until the moment. So the only thing I can recommend to people is that if you're thinking about plexing your account before Thursday, you may want to hang tight until Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, I'm sure everybody does, but there's this family holiday, Thanksgiving in the United States. And when that's over, there's a Black Friday. And the Black Friday is basically like, now that you've fed yourself so much food and you have nothing to do and you have this really empty vacation day of Friday, go out and buy stuff because Christmas is coming. And that turned into a Cyber Monday, and that turned into a whole week of, the week after Thanksgiving is just pure shopping, all for Christmas. So
it's like each day of the week has something special. It's like Small Business Saturday.
Yeah.
Cyber Monday, Giving Tuesday.
It's all marketing terms, just like this thing from China. What was that? Independent Day or something? I don't know. It's like treat yourself right today kind of a day. And it's right along the shopping season.
Oh, that's right. It was like, yeah, you just buy yourself a present. That was what there's like a holiday. It's just like buy yourself.
Well,
Yeah,
I know with Black
20 billion.
Friday, it's got two kind of reasons mainly for the name. Is that for one, that's the day
Singles
that
Day.
most companies get in the black. Like the idea is that you invest all year and then you finally hit your sales goals on the day after Thanksgiving because everyone buys stuff and it goes up like crazy. So then you're in the black. But for me, who worked retail for years and years and years, we call it Black Friday because it's dreaded. I mean, I worked at GameStop for 3 Black Fridays when I was in high school and college, and it was, oh my God, it was a hot mess.
Yeah, my daughter has to work on Black Friday at the mall, and I told her I would drive her. I would drive her and pick her up so she wouldn't have to try and park. But she's got to be there midday. It's going to be a disaster.
I had to be there at 4 a.m. all 3 years because the mall opened early.
Do you have to break up fights?
Oh, I didn't, thankfully, because I gave that to my managers. But I had so many people come in and they were just like, I need to get this weird game for somebody, my husband, my son. And they had no idea what they're doing. And it was, oh God, it's just a hot mess.
Yeah. So we have 3 guys here, Giddy and Tmakler and Play, that told us all the Chinese holiday we were talking about was Singles Day. And that makes sense. Or yeah, Singles. And it's if you're single, you buy yourself a gift because you're single and you deserve it kind of thing. And it's, again, marketing, but they made like 20 billion in one day. It's pretty amazing. Or not they, but one group, I think, made 20 billion on e-sales. All that to say, it's a big shopping holiday. It'll be happening when you hear this show this entire week. Look out for those deals. What CCP did do this weekend is something we haven't seen before. At least it was labeled in a way we hadn't seen before, and that was double XP weekend, or double SP weekend, as far as Eve goes. What do you guys think of that?
Certainly the UI interface, or the way it was executed, has never been done before.
Yeah, they added a daily login UI element, so I suspect we will be seeing some more of this.
Correct. This feels like they're testing out the technology for daily reward. But so basically, what happened was on Thursday they announced that there would be a double SP weekend, and then starting on Friday, if you logged in each of the 2 days of the weekend, then you would get either 25,000 SP if you are an alpha, or if you're an omega, you would actually get 2 packs of 25,000 SP for a total of 50,000 SP each day. So alphas, if you came in both days, you would get 50,000 SP. Omegas would get a total of 100,000 SP. And you can, what was interesting about them was, first of all, the page opened as soon as you logged in. So it was like a pop-up, which CCP has been experimenting more with pop-ups. So that's worth noting. But also, once you claimed it, it went into your redemption panel, so that way you could drag and drop it onto any character you want. Previously, when SP was given out, there was always some hokey way of them deciding who to give it to, whichever character was training at the time, or whichever character has the most SP. So this is like, they're really experimenting with the idea of being able to give people SP and have that be flexible and customizable, and be what people want.
Oh, I did like the time we got 250K. It went to every character on your account, so that was a
So
I do want to ask. So I remember there was server issues earlier this year, and then they said that they were going to give back SP for that, and I don't remember them actually doing that. So the first thing is that this actually made me notice that, right? Like, they're giving away free SP before they actually gave us the SP that they promised, and that felt really weird.
It's a negative.
Yeah, it just reminded me. I'm like, wait, don't you owe me SP still?
This is good, but wait a minute.
I thought we got that because I got 250K SP on all my characters at one point recently.
Okay, well, maybe we did, and then I didn't notice, in which case I take it back. This is awesome.
I don't think I did, but I still have my SP from when the learning skills were removed. So I don't even know how long that was, but that's still my unallocated skill points. So it's like 6 million just chilling. I'm saving it for the moment where I really, really need it for something. And every time I'm like, shit, I really want it for this. There'll probably be something better later that I'll really need it for. I just hoard it, and instead it just grows.
You guys laugh, but I did that with the fax skill. So when they first announced faxes, they released the fax skill book, and then like a week later they were like, actually, we're not going to have a fax skill. We're just going to call it carrier. And so I quickly injected that skill and just trained it as long as I could. So that way, when the expansion came out, all of that became unallocated. So I've had not 6 million, but a few 100,000 SP sitting unallocated on Ashtarothi. And what that meant was 2 days ago, I went from being unable to fly a Revelation to being a relatively decent Revelation pilot like that. So, don't knock it.
I remember when you did that. I thought that was very clever. It's to train basically like, what do they call those? Stem cells?
Yeah, well, once you have over a certain amount of SP, injectors become kind of a non-option. So this unallocated SP for somebody with like over 100 million skill points actually becomes extremely valuable.
Over 80, yeah. I think 80 million is the upper cutoff.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it is. And then I think it's it 20 and then 40 and then 80? Does that make sense? But anyway, what I'm describing is a tiered system where it becomes less and less valuable to inject skill points. So if you can get anything without any penalty on it, then you try to do that sort of thing. So if you can get unallocated skill points, you try to figure out how to do that. All right. So they gave out the stuff. I did notice they're trying to play with pop-ups, because as soon as you came in, the new feature popped up on you, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Well, there's a second pop-up too, which was when you log in, the activity tracker also popped up to let you know, or there was a panel that shows up to tell you about the activity tracker.
Exactly.
So they're really
that's what I was talking about. That thing, that new feature.
Right.
Do you like this thing?
The activity tracker?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. There's one. I've only ran into one little idiosyncrasy about it, which is that anomalies are counted as combat sites. So I'm actually completing my exploration path by running ratting, which doesn't feel right, since there already is, like, it already tracks the ratting on the combat side for NPC kills and NPC sites. But but other than that, it's really a great way to kind of keep track of what you're doing and to be able to show that off. One of the most fun stats that I think that's on there is that it keeps track of how many Abyss runs you've started and how many Abyss runs you've completed. So if you die, it keeps track of that.
Oh,
but like from a faction warfare point of view, I really like the fact that each size plex is split out, and offensive versus defensive plexing is split out. So we could really say, whoever gets the most offensive plexes in this next month gets a reward or something like that. We could track this on a granular level that we just could not have done before, which I really like.
Yeah, there's definitely some good. Although my axe to grind is the exploration and how many systems you've visited. That started fresh the day it launched, and they said, "Well, we don't have that data." Right, we can't just retroactively give it to you. But then I opened the map and look at my stats. I said it knows where all the systems I visited and how often.
Well, here's the issue with that. Okay, here's the issue with that. First of all, you don't know necessarily how that data is tracked, and it may not necessarily have all of the information being tracked that the activity tracker wants to track. Right.
Well, it's just one of those things where I'm just like, the simple answer is, well, we couldn't track it because it's new. I'm like, you got to give me more detail here, because I can look at this. It knows the last time I visited every system in the East.
Sure. Well, for me, though, and again, this might be completely white knighting the feature or whatever, but so I've thought about this from like a design point of view, and the issue is that it's not that they can't track jumps in space. The fact is that they can't track everything, right? So the issue then becomes, well, how much do we go back for each thing, right? So like kills go back to 2009 and jumps go back to 2004 and NPC kills goes back to and that's just a mess, right? Like nobody knows how far back any given thing is tracked. So
all right,
I think it's the most fair to start everyone at, and if you've got a lot of history, then you can get more points faster.
I like it. It's kind of a server wipe for activity, which is okay with me, but it will create a new, a new leaderboard that people can be proud of that haven't been playing since 2006 or something like that. But let's move on because we've got some news to hit before we wrap up today's Thanksgiving special. Can anybody shed light on Mercenary Coalition finally calling it quits?
All roads finally lead back to PL. I can say that for sure. We got him once. We got him a second time. It's sort of a rite of passage. You have to recruit BDCI at some point. I don't have that much super insight into it.
BDCI sorry, let me interrupt here. BDCI is a storied corporation that was the center of Mercenary Coalition. Is that?
I say so, yeah.
And they were in PL, then they went back to, they were in Mercenary Coalition, they went to PL, they went back to Mercenary Coalition, and now they're coming back to PL.
I think that the key here is to look at what pressures caused the reformation of Mercenary Coalition, right? Like Mercenary Coalition really was a big highlight of the casino war or whatever you want to call it, right? So that was a very good time to be a mercenary. But over the course of the last year or two, that has definitely changed, and you're seeing a strong push towards empires. And you did see Mercenary Coalition kind of play with that, but that wasn't what their blood was. And so I actually think it's fitting that Mercenary Coalition is closing its doors right before the war deck changes, because it really is symbolizing a change in what is effective in EVE.
Before I throw it back to Lise, because I took it away from him, sorry about that. We'll say that I talked to Celine about it, who was the longtime leader of Mercenary Coalition. He just said that, it just got away from him. He's been playing a long time, for 15 years, and just thought, it's a good time to stop. And he hadn't trained up a leadership that could kind of take it over for him. It would be work, etc. So they just decided they're going to shutter the place, and the corporations are going to go elsewhere.
And I have no doubt that in like a few years, someone's going to be like, "Yo, remember how great Mercenary Coalition was back in the day? Yo, let's restart that up," and they'll reform it again. Yeah. They'll get the band back together. I have no doubt that.
Yeah, we got all these shirts. We got to use them for something.
Yeah,
the cycle continues.
But I mean, the first time Mercenary Coalition closed its doors, it's because the leadership was becoming a little bit less active. They were basically the top of the top of the top of the food chain, right? And then as things slid away, as the game changed, they weren't at the top anymore because the game didn't allow it. And those people really wanted to be at the top. They're very prideful people. A lot of people in BDCI, at least, were super proud of their corp history. And rightfully so, because they were one of the first corps out there. They accomplished all of the things that they wanted to accomplish. But as that gave way, they kind of slipped into other groups. I know they were in some like not quite feeder corps, but like they weren't pets, but they were like Pets Plus over in like the Queerius area for a while. There was an alliance that actually Manny ran called Cascade Eminent, which was actually a really fun group. But what they weren't known for being like the top tier as MC was back in the day. So they joined PL the first time. They thrived for a while. A lot of old names came back, and they're like, "Oh, this is good. Reliving the glory days." They recruited new members, yada yada yada, and then eventually they just became. PL became stale to them, and they're like, a few of their members were like, we have an idea of what we want to do that we want to try out, and so they left on super good terms. Like I talked to Celine quite a bit back then when he was like, "Yo, we want to give this a try. I've got some people who want to step up and do it, and I think I kind of want to get back into it as well." And he just, in the first time in PL, he just never really got the whole PL thing. So BDCI reformed Mercenary Coalition. They were super successful for a while. They played their role really well. Then they're like these small guys that went out and did some fun stuff. They got some junior FCs to step up from a whole bunch of different little groups. And I don't know, I think they did really well. It wasn't just in the Casino War where they were, I'm not going to call it the Casino War. It wasn't just World War B where they thrived. They did definitely try to make a little empire for themselves. They had like little ratting spaces. But I don't know, they moved around. I think the problem was their size. and this is not their problem, more of a problem with EVE Online, right? Like when you try to do mid game or like small middle gang stuff, not quite the big fleets, but not quite the small fleets. You're in that like middle zone. It gets really murky because you can't compete with the bigger guys, and you over farm the smaller guys, so you can't really find your little comfort zone, right? There's no gray area where you can be a middling alliance. So you have to
We
do
at
these
Fed
small
Up have
stuff.
no idea what you're talking about.
What?
I said we at Fed Up have no idea what you're talking about. We certainly
guys
haven't
have
killed
done it
off
right.
faction warfare.
Yeah. But so you're either a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond. At least that's what I got from how they felt. And so then, as Matterall was saying, they want to do some leadership changes, and then some of those leaderships, like, they just weren't there after a while. You kind of, when you have a big name at the top for a long time, and this isn't a bad thing, this happens all over the place, you kind of drown out the people that might want to step up because they're like, oh, I don't need to step up. This guy's going to be here forever. He's been here since the servers turned on. He'll be there until they turn off. Of course, he's going to be at the top. So I don't need to take on that leadership role. And eventually those people go elsewhere. And then you're left with this kind of glut at the very, very top in terms of leadership.
This is very interesting because I think you're going through a parallel, right? Because you essentially have stepped aside to allow new leadership in the form of Headliner coming up and taking over PL. Why is it that somebody doesn't leave a group to form their own thing? Like, how did you keep Headliner interested in being in PL? Why wouldn't he break away and do his own thing, open up his own shop?
I think PL is very different from every other alliance out there. It's essentially we'll give you as much as you want to take. And that's the way it's been ever since Shadoo came back and kind of, I don't think people realize this in the history of PL, but PL for the first 5 years of the game was very different from PL from the last 10 years or so, or 8. Because it was very much a dictatorship under one person, where one person would make all the calls. And then when Shadoo came back after Delve, so this is even after Delve 2, Shadoo kind of took over PL quite silently, just by being the most active dude. Seamus eventually was like, okay, Shadoo, you're a good guy, you're a great UFC, but you can take over PL. And as he did, he created it as a meritocracy. So essentially, anyone who wanted to do anything, they would have that power to, so long as they did it. And that makes our jobs way easier for replacing leadership types because they're already doing it in a way.
And that really does make sense. One of the biggest problems that I run into is that for any size organization that's larger than just like 4 or 5 people, it's really easy for people to say, well, this is what we need, but not a lot of people to actually like make that happen. Right. So what ends up happening is people will be like, well, we need an industry program. Great. You don't lead it, because like the will to lead is far lower than the will to, or the desire to have things there. So identifying leaders and moving them up into positions if they are interested in making something that they want to happen is a really, like, that's the most effective way to build your leadership core.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Because I figured that what happens with the natural thing is that somebody will come up as an FC, and then if the CEO doesn't handle that, the FC might say, like, look, man, I'll just take all my activity and start something of my own.
Well, but the problem is that there's a lot more to an organization than just FCing, right? Like, so if you split off, then you have to ask yourself, well, how many people am I going to have? Is it going to be enough to make things happen? And then you have to ask all of the questions that the CEO has been asking that you no longer have, that you didn't have to. How am I going to get places for, people things? How am I going to support my IT infrastructure? How am I going to, run meetings and keep people engaged? Where are we going to go? And so finally you go, you know what? Maybe it's just better for me to work within the system.
Where everybody else takes care of stuff.
Yeah.
The greatest resource in EVE always has been and always will be the content enabler type people, right? So for PvP groups, that's a lot of, or like FCs and scouts and stuff. And you could depending on what group you are, if you're like a multifaceted group, it's just people who step up and do things and like put in the work so someone else can enjoy the game. That's what I define like a content enabler as. And that's always been the most crucial resource. Like, who cares about Technetium back in the day or Dysprosium or how many Rook miners you have now? Like, it's all about the content enablers and how you can keep them happy.
So we think of the content enablers as fleet commanders, right? Because that's, I don't know, everybody seems to think that this game is just about PvP. I don't, but I think there's a big thing about like, well, without an FC, you really don't have much going on. You can really do a lot more. You can really do a lot without an actual FC. Like you could have somebody that just runs a mining operation or somebody that does incursions or things like that, right?
Everybody thinks that it's all PvP until their supplies run out.
Well,
I think it's all the really cool stories about EVE Online are like PvP centric a little bit, and like how empires are built are all kind of started on the base of PvP type thing. So I think a lot of people just be like, oh, PvP and FCs are like the lifeblood of EVE. And while I think FCs play a super important role, I actually did a really neat thing. Oh, why can't I think of the word? Talk at EVE FanFest about like the history of FCs and how it's like shaped.
That's really
EVE
good.
culture. It was really fun to do. I did that with Headliner. I tricked them into doing it.
You look pretty shy up there. Catch that. It was FanFest 2018, Elise Randolph's presentation on FCs and their histories. Really, really interesting stuff. Real quick, Kaskora, you're a CEO. What's it like keeping people, just keeping people going?
Well, I always like to try to lead by example. I feel like just me being on and doing things makes other stuff happen, which is why right now, and I'm like covered in grad school finals and 2 jobs and a graduate assistantship and everything. It's hard for me to do what I want to do in EVE because just being a presence for my corp is really important to me. And so I try to just be on Discord and try to chat with people as much as I can so that they know that I'm still around, because I feel like it's very easy to think that EVE is dying just because activity is a little bit low for a few weeks. And, everything kind of comes in waves. I feel like there's always going to be ups and downs. There's going to be times where you have a weekend where you can't stop running into somebody to fight. And then there's going to be some weekends where everyone's gone for Thanksgiving and there's not a lot going on. So you have to just always keep doing stuff, even if it's not real glamorous. Like my husband always talks about how like he'll get on and he'll just start running wormhole sites, just start ratting. And then all of a sudden, like 8 people come out of the woodwork and it's like, oh, you run sites? Can I run sites? And it's like, you could have been doing that before he got on the whole time. It's just taking that initiative is what is always the most difficult thing. Because there's so much to be done in EVE. There's always things to do. They might not be big, giant fleet fights, but there's things that you can scan. There's gas that you could mine. There's roams you could go out to K-Space. I mean, I'm talking wormhole or stuff, but there's always things to do. It's just you have to take that initiative. And so at least for me as a leader, I always try to illustrate how easy it is to take initiative. And so it to me, it's a big failure for me that I can't be on as much right now as I want to be, because I feel like that's one of my biggest strengths as a leader is just leading by example.
And it's really just it's almost like doing something that you can invite someone else to do. It's as easy as that, being a content creator.
I mean, with wormhole space, you always got to scan, you always got to look for stuff. But we've had people who just go out and mine, and then all of a sudden someone will roll into us and see us mining, and then all of a sudden a fight will happen. Like it's just by doing anything, other things will happen.
There was this guy.
So that's the biggest.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. There was this guy in a different game, and I didn't know him from anybody, but he would show up and he would have like the tickets necessary to run a certain dungeon, let's call it. And, you had to go do this quest to get those tickets, but he would always have them, and he'd say, come on, let's do this. And he would just invite us along and stuff. It was a really sad story, because when he disappeared, I realized like how valuable that guy is. He's not leadership. He's not even well known in the corporation, but he was just the guy that would show up with the things to do the other things. And yeah, I guess in EVE, that's the logistic people, but that's also the guys that are just doing a small room or running an incursion or something.
Any amount of taking initiative. Like I said, everybody knows what they want to see happen, but nobody's making it happen, right? So just the smallest catalyst can get people to latch on, because a lot of people, that's actually a big thing, is that people are looking for direction. People are looking for something to do. So if you can just give them that, then usually they'll hook on to it.
Yeah, but
I always feel like my biggest, the whole point of me as a leader is I'm trying to create opportunities for the rest of my corp. And so I want to put us in a situation where there's always opportunities to do all kinds of different things. And even if I'm not the one actually doing them, I'm like handing the opportunity to people, or at least getting us in the best position to do that. But it is always hard to get those people to just take it. Like you can do everything to put them in the best position possible, but it's hard for people to step up and take it. Sometimes it's intimidating because they don't want to lead people, or they don't want to just do something because if they don't do it right, then they'll feel dumb or something, or they just are overwhelmed by how much there is to do. I mean, that's one of the things about Eve, is there's so many things to do that you don't even know where to start. So there's a lot of weird little kind of psychological barriers, I feel like. And it's easy to just say, like, just do it. But actually taking that step is always the difficult part.
Right. Wilhelm, let me give it to Wilhelm here. You're in the Imperium. Are you there because there's a lot of people to set things up so that you can just kind of come in and do things?
Yeah, I'm like at the other end of the spectrum of leadership. I'm there to show up and do what the FC says, and I try and always have the right doctrineships ready and do anything and fill out the fleet and do the little things, whatever little things I can do to make sure that the FC can provide content. But I'm along for the ride. I'm like a space tourist at this point.
But from your personal perspective, this is your hobby. You don't want to be the one that is organizing people, do you?
When we were talking about work versus Eve, I do that at work already. So it's sort of escapist thing for me to not have to worry about being the organizing person and driving the current sprint and keeping everybody in track.
Oh, interesting.
So I was in Test Alliance during World War. And after that, that was kind of my first exposure to actually being in like a large, quote unquote, functional alliance. And so I used that as an opportunity to kind of learn what I liked and what I didn't like, what I thought could be done better. And then I needed to create a corp so that way I could actually start this process. And I made a corp a few years back, or like a year or two before that, but nobody joined. So that was not very successful. But more importantly, like I said, there's all this infrastructure and all this other stuff that I didn't know how to do, and I didn't have the capability of doing, and nor the will to do it. And what I realized was Aderon Robotics was more or less running on autopilot at the time. It had no real leadership since myself and Marcel had left a while back, but it was still doing what it needed to do. It had its own logistics wing that was bringing in hauling in stuff into the war zone and stuff like that. So the people that were there were still maintaining the fire, as it were. And so instead of creating my own infrastructure from scratch, which I knew I couldn't probably do very easily, I just went there and I was like, hey, you guys want a leader? And they were like, sure. So that's how that happened.
Oh, so you crawled into the head of the robot?
Yep. I literally held I called a meeting of all the leaders, and I was like, so who would like me to take over? And they were like, sure. So that's how it started.
At least you're now on the other end of this, right? Because you ran PL for a long time.
Yeah, I think I ran it for the longest amount of anyone not named Seamus. So I literally just ran it for like a year longer than she. Though I didn't really run it by myself. Graf deserves a lot of the credit as well. It was always a team, honestly.
Was he your sergeant at arms that would yell at people?
He was my bad cop.
I got a question about that, actually.
Super nice.
So last time I checked, which was a while ago, PL's leadership was basically based on war bands, right? Whoever was the war commander at that time was the de facto commander. But then when you became the war commander, it kind of seemed to stop rotating. What happened in that transition?
So it didn't stop. It operated exactly like how it did under Shadu. But essentially, The way it works is the campaign commander can run a campaign, and in that he has the ability to make basically any decision he wants. So for the longest time, Shadu was the campaign commander, but then sometimes he wasn't, and then the current campaign commander would still defer to him on like the larger things, like, hey, should we decide to hold space, or what should we do with this money that we have? And the same thing is essentially what I did, right? So if someone wanted to run a campaign, so for a while for World War B, Killer B was a campaign commander, so he decided to take PL in that direction, and he made all the decisions when it came to like the deployments and stuff like that. But I was still around just in case he needed a hand, and for like the large aspects, the large planning things, and whenever people needed to like come to a decision where there was like a disagreement, they needed like a tiebreaker vote. So they're like, "Oh, what do you think?" So I was like, "Oh, thanks for letting me weigh in. So here's what my suggestion is." The biggest thing that I learned from Shadu when it came to running Alliance is that the worst thing you could do for PL, this isn't true for other groups, but the worst thing you can do for PL is to be inactive and make a decision that someone else has to do, because that sucks, right? You sometimes at some points it'll be great, but eventually you'll begin to loathe the person telling you what to do, and you won't put your heart into it, or it just won't feel right. So I always tried to make it so if I wasn't active, the people who were most active could make all the decisions, and we'd just kind of go from there.
Well, I think that's super interesting. Now, one more thing about Pandemic Legion, since we covered it yesterday, you now have Mercenary Coalition Corp going back into PL. What's PL up to? 2 for Mercenary Coalition.
We have Black Omega Syndicate, who used to be in PL way back, and BDCI. Both were from MC, and both are now in PL.
Oh, excellent. I guess we should also report that Northern Coalition is deployed to Vale, I guess the border of Vale and Geminate, and they are probably fighting Goon or Imperium SIGs as they come up to try to harass. I don't know what the blue situation is, or the alliance. Who are the allies and who are the enemies there? Do you know?
I know NC loves shooting Horde, and for good reason, and I don't think they. But I think the NC is capable of seeing the larger picture. It's something that I never really like doing, is looking at the larger picture, because the short-term picture is more. But NC really do keep an eye on that larger picture. So if they do shoot Horde, I'm sure it'll just be for like little fun stuff.
But would they be fighting, do you think, the Imperium as they come up to harass Horde, or will they be fighting Horde, or both?
I imagine that they'll just be fighting. They'll like be focusing on fighting NC, or on Imperium stuff. But they're their own men.
Yeah, I mean, we had a battle on Friday night. Test had been going up and reinforcing stuff in Geminate against Pandemic Horde,
right?
And Thomas Lear took out a fleet of Serbs that I was in on Friday night to go help them out, and we faced NC Dot, PL, PH, and Black Legion, and definitely came off the worst on that fight. But it was good to get out and do something.
Yeah, so they were fighting together against you guys.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure that NC Dot's still technically neutral to Horde, but for like the big picture type things, I'm sure they'll be on Horde.
Well, you go after red before you go after gray, neutral. You go after enemies before you go after neutrals, before you go after blues.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, I don't think NC really care about Horde space by any means.
Mm-hmm.
They'd much rather have Horde have this space than just let it be fallow.
Well, and the funny thing is that NC has gone down there and they're helping Horde against whoever's coming out, space violence and Test, while Horde is also then deployed to go against Guardians of the Galaxy up in Branch and around there. So NC Dot's sort of straddling this because they're friends with both sides in that one.
They're making their children fight it out to see who is the strongest one. They just put them in a cage, break a pool stick in half, throw both halves in there, and just see. We only have enough love in our hearts for one. That's actually not at all what they do. They probably are really nice to both, but in my head, that's how it's playing out, and it just makes me happier that way. Okay.
This makes for better entertainment. Another thing that happened is the initiative anchored a second Keep Star in Fountain, and Adhocracy, one of my old corporations, is evicted again from their wormhole. And it seems like they're not really that active anyway, but sad to see them get evicted. Yeah.
How are we talking about things ending in Eve without talking about Cheshire quitting the game?
We're getting there, actually. We're ticking through the monthly economic report for the last 2 months was released, so you can check those out. That was put out by CCP Falcon.
Spoiler alert, Gooden's win. Just if you don't feel like looking at graphs, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah,
you open it up and it's a giant picture of a bee.
Now, the biggest thing in the October report is Fade went missing. And so has anybody been to Fade to see if it's still there? And second, Aerith said yesterday on the Meta Show that there's a low threshold after which a region won't appear in the report. So apparently Fade has just been like burned to the ground and nothing's going on there anymore.
I'm sure Asher will be very, very happy. He'll just be super smug about the decline of Fade.
Well, Fade,
I see what you did there.
Yeah, Fade has been basically we call it Belgium in World War I, right? It was the trenches, so it's all just gone dark after all the war has stopped.
Rename Fade Flanders. That's
and actually, that's a good nod to reality, right? Because the war ended 100 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah. See how I did that? So Test anchors the first beacon. That is some of the new structures, the new flex structures, right? And Goonswarm anchors the first network bridge. And those were both congratulatory messages coming out from CCP.
I have to set up my fast pass for the Imperium Jump Bridge network because they're gonna charge for the fuel for us.
Oh, they are. Oh, you're kidding.
No more. No, I'm not. No more free rides. Yeah. We got to pay for the fuel, but it's only being done because apparently it's so the amounts are so small. But CCP said you'll be able to set up to auto pay that. So that I got to figure out how to set up a fast pass so I can move around.
It's in your wallet. If you open up to your wallet, there's a new tab that says automatic pay settings, and you can check activate jump gate and put whatever the minimum is.
So that's your fast pass. In other words, you don't have to hit yes, I'll pay for that every time you pass through.
I stumbled upon that like 3 days ago, and I've just been waiting for somebody to ask.
There you go.
Glad to tee that up for you.
That is nice. And the taxes go to the sovereign gate holder.
Should be the gate owner. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a way of taxing people, taxing transportation inside your own.
Well, it's for paying for fuel, right? Like if you set it to being about the same amount as the isogens cost, then you don't have to worry about, because if you don't charge them, then some idiot line member is going to jump their carrier through over and over again and not realize that they're charging you like millions and millions.
I mean, that's a thing that we did back in the day when jump bridges were a big part of how people got around. We'd just get an alt or a spy in that group and just put them in a freighter and have them jump back and forth in jump bridges until a crucial one just ran out of fuel, right? So they would put up a big CTA fleet. They'd be like, oh, we have to get from our main staging, or we have to get from like wherever your staging is to our main staging, take the jump bridges. And like an hour beforehand, we'd have just been jumping a blue freighter back and forth, killing all the fuel out there. And so they weren't able to kind of get in there. So the numbers would be smaller.
Wild.
It's when we couldn't actually shoot the bridge. It was actually way better than shooting the bridge, because if you shot the bridge, then people would be aware of it.
It's like
Yeah,
when
they don't realize something's
it's like
wrong.
when a political party sends you a mailer to send back to them, and they'll pay the postage. If they send it to you and they're the wrong political party, you send it back empty.
Yeah.
So they have to lose money for no gain. Kaskar, can you read that guy's or girl's juxty, what they wrote there in chat, since you answered it?
Oh, any way to get in touch with different corps in Eve other than normal recruitment sections? I mean, I can't speak for nullsecers, but I know for wormholers, just about every corp has a public channel that you can track. If you just look at the info on the corp or alliance, there'll be a link to a public channel. That's a big way that people get in touch with corps directly instead of having to use the recruitment interface or anything like that.
Also, an Eve jobs.
Yeah, the
subreddit.
Eve Java subreddit is the best way that I've found.
Well, it depends. Yeah, I mean,
Well, I think the best way is in the game, as Kaskar is describing, but Eve Jobs on Reddit works too.
Eve Jobs is great for just looking at what corps are recruiting. I mean, if you're just like not sure where you want to go, it's the best for stuff like that. But if you know you want to get in touch with a corp, even if it's not for recruitment purposes, I mean,
Right.
They usually all have public channels. So looking at which ones those are is always helpful.
My issue with using the in-game recruitment process to find a corp is that you just find a lot of people that are extremely low effort that are not actually like building anything. If you go on Eve Jobs or subreddit, you're at least dealing with people that have gone through that level of effort to try to put themselves out there. And so you just generally get more complete organizations, if that makes sense. Every corporation that I have found on the corporation finder has been basically a dead corp.
Oh,
I
really?
actually, when it comes to like recruitment channels and stuff, in-game recruitment channels or in-game public channels, I actually ran into a really, really terrible change that I don't know when it happened in Eve, but it did happen in the last 6 months, where you can no longer add someone to be a channel operator for an in-game chat channel unless you're the owner. Before, it used to be an operator could add an operator. But now it's only an owner can add an operator. And all of our channels for PL are on people that haven't played. And I looked like at least 9.
Wow.
Yeah, that problem happened because of the changeover in chat servers, right? Like when they changed over to how the chat system works, then that was when that new rule, we're going to call it, was.
Well, yeah, this Juxty has another question. So if I want to evolve my fsing and create content in Eve, is there something special I should be looking for and try to stay away from, both even, sorry, it keeps moving, even if it comes to small or big?
Okay, so the one thing I have to say, if you want to FC, and this is probably universal from every FC I've talked to, when you start out, you feel personally responsible for every person that dies on your fleet. And you're like, oh, geez, man, I'm so sorry that you died doing that thing where everyone had fun. And then when you say it out loud like that, you're like, oh, shit, these people, like, they join your fleet with the expectation that they will die in order to do something in the game. So don't feel bad when they do actually die. It's totally fine. You got it. Just let them die.
Yeah. Imagine that and this is, I don't have nearly the experience that Elise does, but that just makes a lot of sense. Imagine that you're driving a tractor and they're on the back. They can jump off anytime they want. They're going to have a great time either way. I'm thinking of a hayride. Instead of worrying like, oh my God, they all fell off and it's my fault because they drove into this ditch. Because I think that's a huge barrier. The pressure to not screw everybody up because they're going to lose money or whatever is huge.
Yeah, or like, so another big thing is for new FCs, they're like, oh man, guys, I'm so sorry that we didn't find anything good. I mean, yeah, but you tried. So that's the whole thing. Like, people came not expecting to like come in with the best fight ever. They just wanted to fly around in space with their boys, you know?
I have 2 pieces of advice. The first is good decisions come from experience, which comes from bad decisions, right? Do not worry about the mistakes that you're going to make. just consider those mistakes something that you have to make to become a good FC. Your goal is not to FC this particular fleet. Your goal is to become a good FC. And becoming a good FC takes good nights and bad nights. So if you have a bad night, then as long as you learn from it, then you got that bad night under your belt, and now you're going to have one less bad night. And that's great. The other piece of advice that I got to say is based on that and based on this whole fear about the people that you're dealing with. The best thing to do, in my opinion, is the same thing that a lot of people do when they first start playing PvPing at all, which is just get a collection of relatively cheap or ships that you are willing to lose, and then provide those to your fleet. Remove that cost from the people that are coming with you, and then they've got nothing else to worry about. And if they decide to show up in a Dramule anyways, then when they lose it, they know what they signed up for.
Well, this is cool, and I'm telling him that he can jump onto TIS Discord. Links here in chat. We'll put it in the show notes, and you can always go to talkinginstations.com to reach the Discord, because there's a channel there called Questions, and that's for new players, returning players, and anybody, including myself, to ask, how do you do this thing, or what's some advice on this or that? And it's open to all 1,600 people who are in TIS, so you'll probably get an answer pretty quick. But let's move along and wrap up. We have a little bit of Talking in Stations news now that I plug that. And that is that we have a Wednesday show that just started. We did a dress rehearsal on Thursday. It went very well. We talked about faction warfare. It wasn't recorded, so you won't find it on the Talking in Stations Twitch channel. But from now on, they will be. We will have a Thanksgiving show as well, which will happen this Thursday and every Thursday after that. So 2 Talking in Stations per week. That's the what we hope to do, and get podcasts up and out there as quickly as possible. In addition to other stuff that we'll be developing for Talking in Stations too. And Kiskora is our wonderful web developer, and all these guys in TIS crew are doing a great job in getting research and putting it all together. We did put out... Yeah.
I just want to make a note to people. If you're having problems finding the show on Spotify, for some reason, there are 2 instances of our podcast showing up on Spotify right now. One of them only has like 5 episodes, but the other one has the entire list, and it's getting currently updated. So I'm currently trying to like go through the chains of help commands to get them to remove the bad one. But if you are looking for us on Spotify and you see only like 5 episodes, just search again, and you should hopefully find our real one farther down.
Cool. Again, find us on talkingstations.com or find us on Discord. That's where we're all at most of the time. After these shows, by the way, we funnel into there and then meet the crowd that was watching the show. That happens every show. We do the show, and then we jump into Discord and answer questions that weren't answered on the show. Last thing is that Dirk McGurk, good friend, part of the show, has his own show called the Open Comms Show. He's going to be taking a break this winter. He's going to take a 3-month break, and maybe that's turns into a longer break for him, but he's going to have some surgery. So we wish him well with that. He'll be around until, I think, for another 2 weeks. So watch Open Comms and say hello to him. And yeah, we wish him the best. And if he ends up winning Eve and staying away, that's fantastic. If he ends up coming back, that's great too. He's a great commentator on the game. Okay,
they're trying to finally give him a heart.
No, that's who would that be? That would be the Straw Man, wouldn't it?
Tin Man.
The Tin Man.
Straw Man wants a brain.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around. No, that makes sense. You know that
the whole movie comes together for you.
Yeah.
The Tin Man has the door in his chest. That's how I remember.
I think you're right, because he represented the industrial age.
Oh my God, that movie came out in the 30s, guys. Come on.
It did. He was supposed to be the industrial age, and he didn't have a heart because the industrial age was so brutal to workers when it first. And then the Straw Man is the agricultural age. He didn't have a brain.
He didn't have a brain.
Yeah.
And then the lion.
No, he didn't have courage. Oh
no, the lion didn't have courage. It was the cowardly lion.
The lion was actually a political leader of the time who didn't have the courage to do certain things. I don't know. Wizard of Oz, very political film. I don't know if you knew that.
I officially am sorry for having brought us on this.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for showing up today. Elise and Will, thank you so much. My wife is gone, so I can't actually thank her, but she'll maybe hear this. And it was great. We had a Thanksgiving little session for us. Everybody have great holidays. We will have a show on Thursday with Artemis taking the lead there. But I won't see you until next Sunday. So everybody have a great Thanksgiving holidays and spend good time with your family. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week on Talking in Stations.
Bye.
So long.